That morning the sky brought neither rain nor sunshine, just a pale silver light spilling through the windows, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I've welcomed many into this room, those who had lost someone, a dream, or even themselves. But when Clara Winchester walked in, I knew I was about to hear something different. Not the usual pain, but the kind of sorrow that had been folded neatly away behind the mask of a woman who seemed unbreakable. She wore a long gray coat, buttoned to the neck. Her hair was tied in a neat bun. No makeup. Only a faint touch of lipstick, the last trace of kindness she'd offered herself.
I gæstet for her tog sit.
She nodded slightly and took her seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I'm not here to ask how to forgive, Clara began, her voice calm and low. Nor am I looking for answers. I just need to hear myself say it out loud. I didn't reply, only nodded gently. In that moment, it wasn't empathy that made the room safe. It was silence. A silence that made space for what had never been said. People always see me as a strong woman, accomplished, rational. But no one ever teaches you how to survive. After you've made it through every storm, only to realize there's nothing waiting on the other side but yourself. She paused and looked up at me, her eyes a mix of exhaustion and hollowness. I used to believe that if I was good enough, smart enough, kind enough, then family would be something I'd never lose. But I was wrong. And when I realized that, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just empty. I observed Clara like someone gazing at a painting after a fire. The outline's still there, but the light that once gave it life gone. Is there something you want to understand more deeply? I asked. She smiled faintly, her eyes still fixed on the nothingness outside the window. I want to understand why a woman who had everything still couldn't hold on to the one thing that mattered most. I want to understand why I don't feel hatred, only this quiet sorrow for myself. And why, even now, I remember exactly what it felt like, that moment when everything collapsed, yet I still had to go to work, still had to smile, still had to live kindly, as if no one had ever stabbed me in the back. In her, I saw a symphony of pride and pain, a quiet ocean boiling beneath its still surface. Clara, if you're ready, I'll be here to walk back through it all with you. For the first time, her eyes glistened with tears, not out of weakness, but because, at last, there was a space quiet enough to hear the sound of something breaking deep within. Okay, she whispered, but I want to tell it in my own way. Not to blame anyone, but so I can remember how much it hurt and how I didn't die. The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of a door slowly opening. If you're listening, this is one of life's secret whispers, secret stories, sank quietly into our lives. A whisper small in voice, yet heavy with heartbreak, betrayal, and rebirth. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to hear life's next whisper. I poured her another cup of tea, my fingers gently resting on the edge of the white porcelain now gone cold. Outside, the New England sky wept quietly, fine rain like mist trailing down the fogged window pane. In this warm and silent room, Clara stared out at the dull gray horizon, as if trying to retrieve a fragment of memory lost to time. I said nothing more. A good therapist knows when silence is needed. Then her voice broke the stillness, soft as a breeze, yet strong enough to make the heart of the listener tremble. He used to be the place I ran to when the world out there spun too fast. A pause. The ticking of the wall clock echoed like footsteps from a distant past. And then, one morning, just like this one, with soft rain falling, and just one message, just the faint glow of his phone screen, lit up a truth I had always tried to blur. She drew a deep breath. It was a Thursday. I remember clearly because it was the day he always came home late. After squash and 2 bourbons at the club, I woke up earlier than usual. Maybe because I hadn't slept well. Or maybe because something in me already knew. Clara turned toward me, her eyes glassy but no longer wavering. He was in the shower. Steam fogged up the mirror. And his phone lay there. So still, so innocent, like it had never hurt anyone. Then it lit up. I saw her hand tremble slightly. Clara tightened her grip on the teacup handle. It wasn't the whole message, just the preview on the lock screen. But sometimes the cruelty of the universe lies in giving us just enough to die inside, but not enough to fully understand. She lifted her gaze. Her eyes now looked like a lake just struck by a stone. Can't wait for Friday at the beach house. Bought that red lingerie. You. I remained silent. So did Clara. The rain outside fell harder now. On the window pane, droplets began to trickle like bitter memories flowing down the surface of time. It's strange, she whispered. People think pain comes from something grand. But for me it was just a second. A flicker. A message with no beginning and no end. But enough to tear apart 13 years with the same man. I nodded, not to confirm, but to let her know I was still here, still listening to every shattered piece falling from her chest. I didn't cry then, Clara continued. I didn't even touch the phone. I just stood there, toothbrush still in hand, eyes fixed on the screen as if hoping the words would vanish. But they didn't. They stayed. And that sentence etched itself into my mind like a tattoo that would never fade. Then I washed my face, did my makeup, chose the usual beige office suit. I sat at my desk, hosted a Zoom call with European partners, closed a new investment deal. No one knew that the woman smiling on their screens had just lost her husband to a single notification. I exhaled slowly, setting down my notebook. And that was when you decided to seek the truth? Clara nodded. I didn't touch the phone. Not then. But from that moment on, I started tracing every clue, every call, every receipt, every distant look in his eyes. They all became pieces in a game I never wanted to play. She pressed her lips together. I thought I was strong. But the painful irony is, when you discover that the person you love most is building a life without you, that's when you realize how fragile you really are. I allowed a few moments of silence to rise and settle before gently asking, and who was he in that message? Clara closed her eyes. A silence descended, heavy as stone. My man. The one who held my hand through 3 years of infertility treatment. The one who once promised, no matter what happens, you will always be my home. She opened her eyes. His name is Nathan. And he burned that home down with a single message. We didn't meet at a loud bar or a sterile office surrounded by glass walls. Clara chose an old cafe by the Hudson River. One with dark wooden tables and soft amber lights that seemed to spotlight each moment as it passed. I arrived early. As a counselor, I no longer stood at the edges. I sat at a small table in the back, quietly watching this story unfold like a play, with no winners, only hearts trying to remember how to beat again after a devastating collision. Clara walked in, her makeup minimal, no lipstick, but her eyes no longer trembled like they had that first day. She pulled out a chair, nodded to me gently, like it was a ritual that deserved reverence. He came in a few minutes later, she began, her voice as soft as morning fog. 5 minutes late. But I couldn't blame him. No one shows up on time to face a truth they've spent weeks trying to deny. Liam, the husband of the other woman, walked in. He wore a simple gray coat, his hair slightly unkempt, and his eyes looked like they hadn't seen rest in days. He sat across from me. For the first 30 seconds, neither of us spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much and all of it hurt. I asked, who spoke first? He did, Clara replied. Just one question. Short, but it opened the door that had been holding back a storm. Sophia, my wife. She's sleeping with your husband, isn't she? Clara nodded. No games.
No sugarcoating.
Yes. No one cried. No one screamed. The truth just sat quietly between 2 cooling cappuccinos. They seemed serious. Yeah, they're meeting this weekend at the beach house. The same one Nathan and I built together after we found out I was pregnant with our first, and then lost the baby in that very house. Clara's voice cut like a blade. Liam tightened his grip around his cup. My wife told me she had a work trip in Chicago. My husband said he had a conference in Boston. They laughed. An aching kind of laugh, like the sound of people left standing at a train station long after the train has pulled away. Then Clara said something unexpected. I don't want to stay silent anymore. What about you? Liam looked up and something changed in his eyes. He was no longer just a man who'd found out his wife was cheating. He was someone about to step into a new role, one where he finally took back control of his own story. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, he said. But if you have a plan.
I'm listening.
Clara told me later that something strange happened in that moment. It wasn't empathy, it was alliance. Two people betrayed by the same lie, choosing to rewrite the ending together. They think they're planning a romantic getaway? Yeah, but in the end they'll have to face the truth in that same house. Are you sure?
No.
But this time, I won't stay silent. In that moment, I saw something new in Clara's eyes. Not hope, but the kind of light that comes after you've hit rock bottom, and you rise, not for revenge, but to reclaim the authorship of your life. The road to the house curved gently through rows of thinning pines, their leaves tinged with the wistful colors of late autumn. Clara sat behind the wheel, eyes fixed on the road, but I knew her mind wasn't there. It had already drifted back to an old harbor. Once a home, once a cradle of dreams, and once, the grave of the most sacred thing in her life. Liam arrived first. He stood silently outside, like a statue beside the weathered white gate, now faded by time. When Clara stepped out of the car, they simply nodded. No hug, no smile. But between them was a silence of shared grief, like two mourners stepping into a cathedral where faith once lived and had just died. The house came into view, unchanged, gray shingles, wooden porch, wide glass windows overlooking the sea. But Clara, she was no longer the woman who once sat by that window, cradling a hopeful belly and whispering names to a child that never came. When I miscarried, she said softly to Liam as she unlocked the door. He didn't make it back in time. He said he was in a meeting. His flight was delayed. Or maybe that was the first lie. I don't know anymore. The house still smelled familiar. Salt air, pine wood, and a faint hint of lavender. The scent Clara had always loved. They stepped inside slowly, carefully, as if afraid of disturbing sleeping ghosts. Clara wandered through each room. The living room where they once celebrated New Year's. The kitchen where Nathan used to clumsily make her coffee every morning. The master bedroom, where she lost the baby. Everything was still in place, untouched, as if time had paused. Everything except Clara. They began preparing. Not like one prepares for dinner or a family gathering. This felt more like setting the stage for a reckoning. Liam dragged two heavy armchairs into the center of the living room. Clara picked the most expensive bottle of whiskey from the cabinet, the kind Nathan saved for birthdays and anniversaries, and placed 4 crystal glasses on the coffee table. The late afternoon light spilled through the windows, casting a long beam across the hardwood floor, like a curtain rising before the final act. What do you think they'll do? Liam asked, his voice dry. I don't know, Clara replied, but I'm not afraid anymore. They chose not to wait in the bedroom. Not because I'm weak, Clara explained, but because that's the last place I still share with my child. I won't let betrayal stain that memory. They sat in the living room, facing the front door, the door their unfaithful partners were about to walk through unaware. Time passed slowly, like the final breaths of a fading day. Clara stood and stepped out onto the balcony facing the sea. The wind tousled her hair. The setting sun painted the sand in shades of gold. Liam joined her, saying nothing. Two people, two wounds, staring at an ocean as still and silent as their own hearts. Did you ever imagine a day like this? She asked. I always thought that if marriage faced storms, I'd weather them, Liam said. But I never imagined the storm would come from the one I was trying to protect. Clara gave a small laugh, not bitter, just quietly resigned. I'm a lawyer. I've spent my life solving problems with logic. But this time, everything slipped through my fingers like sand. They spoke, not about the cheaters but about themselves. The first dates. The first kisses, the dreams of a house filled with children's laughter. They stitched their memories back together, not to hold on but to gently fold them away. The sun had nearly disappeared. And then the sound came, low, sharp, cold, the security alert. Clara stood upright, her heartbeat strangely calm. They're here, she said. Earlier than expected. Liam entered first. Clara followed. They took their places. 2 armchairs facing the door. Glasses poured. Lights dimmed to a soft glow. Warm enough to welcome, but cold enough to judge. A car door slammed outside. Laughter echoed beyond the door. Clara turned to me, her gaze no longer that of a wounded wife, but of a woman ready to face her pain. not to destroy but to be free from it. Tonight, she whispered, I'm no longer a side character in my own story. The wooden door opened with a soft creak, like the first crack in a wall that had held too much for too long. Nathan stepped in first, a bottle of champagne in one hand, his weekend bag in the other. He turned and smiled at the woman behind him, a smile that no longer belonged to Clara. Sophia followed, arms wrapped around a bouquet of white flowers, her silk dress swaying gently in the breeze, as if this were nothing more than a romantic getaway between two people untouched by consequence. Where should I put the flowers to make the place feel more like home? Her voice rang out, light and innocent, untouched by guilt. And then time stopped. They saw them, Clara and Liam, sitting still like stone statues. No judgment in their eyes, yet no softness either. It would have looked like a normal scene, if it weren't staged so perfectly. Two chairs facing the door, for glasses of whiskey, and two hearts bracing themselves for the final freefall. The champagne slipped from Nathan's hand. The shatter echoed through the house like a thunderclap on a clear day. Sophia's bouquet dropped next. Petals scattering like innocence spilled across dark wood floors. Welcome, Clara said, her voice as calm and cutting as sea wind, to our beach house. No one responded. Nathan and Sophia froze. And for one suspended moment, Clara saw it in their eyes, panic, shame, the scramble to form an excuse they didn't have time to invent. Clara, I can explain. Perfect, she cut in. Because I'd really like to hear it. Liam stood. No longer the betrayed man, but someone awake, standing tall, looking straight at the woman who once promised to grow old with him. You said Chicago. You said it was work. His voice was dry, bitter. Turns out it was the Hamptons. With someone else's husband. In this house. Sophia stepped back, her lips trembling. I'm sorry. I don't know where to begin. Let me help, Clara said. Let's start 7 months ago. With the messages I read. The photos. The midnight whispers you thought no one heard. Nathan turned to her. Desperate. You read everything? No, she replied. Just enough to understand I've been living inside an illusion. No one screamed. No glass was thrown. But the silence screamed louder than rage. It was a verdict delivered without trial. The weight of every secret laid bare within these walls. Their betrayal was the evidence. Suddenly, Sophia collapsed. Right there, between broken glass and fallen petals, she dropped to her knees, hands covering her face, sobbing. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Liam looked at her, not with hate, but with the dull stare of someone mourning something long gone. Clara remained seated, her back straight, one hand gripping a glass of untouched whiskey. There was no fury left in her, only a cold, measured strength that came from falling all the way down and climbing back up on her own. Nathan stammered, Clara, I never meant to hurt you. She turned to him, eyes sharp as glass. So you chose to betray me in the very house where I lost our child? Nathan looked as if he'd been struck. His lips moved but no words followed. Sophia looked up, voice raw. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. The room froze. Liam narrowed his eyes. Not shocked, not pleased, just quietly confirming that an ending was being written in real time. So here we are, Clara said slowly, for people. 2 marriages. 1 house. And a truth that no one can bury anymore. There would be no judge. No court. The curtain had fallen. The sea breeze that night was no longer gentle. It was heavy, dense with secrets on the verge of breaking in a late-season storm. The room remained unchanged. 4 people, 4 corners, 4 emotions teetering on the edge. Then, a sob from Sophia broke the silence, fragmented like seashells cracking underfoot. I have something to say. She stood, her hand instinctively covering her abdomen, eyes misty yet resolute. Everyone turned to her, sensing a shift, something about to overturn the confrontation that had seemed to reach its peak. I'm pregnant. Sophia's voice was barely louder than the wind slipping through the doorframe. Clara froze. That simple, short sentence echoed like a bell tolling in the still night. Nathan staggered as if struck in the chest. Liam stood motionless, like a statue turned to stone by time. I found out last week, Sophia continued. I haven't told anyone yet. I plan to tell Nathan during this trip. Clara turned away slightly, her nostrils flaring. This house, the place where her dream of motherhood was buried, was now the cradle for another woman's child. A cruel joke of fate. Liam stepped forward, his voice unsteady. Is the baby mine? Sophia nodded. Yes. Nathan and I were always careful. I know it's yours. A prolonged silence ensued, stretching into eternity. Nathan's arms fell to his sides. You're pregnant. And I had no idea. You chose to tell your lover before your husband. Sophia lowered her gaze, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to. I was confused. I needed to understand what I wanted. And me. Liam laughed bitterly. A laugh of someone who had lost everything. I waited a year for you to agree to have a child. You always said, it's not the right time. Turns out, the right time was when you were betraying me. Clara gripped the armrest tightly, trying to steady herself amidst this new horror. Memories flashed. The hospital room, dim lights. The doctor's words. No heartbeat. And Nathan, sitting outside, as cold as the hospital corridor. You said, that loss made you unable to face fatherhood, Clara whispered. Turns out, you just couldn't face it. With me. Nathan remained silent, his head bowed, hands covering his face. Sophia slowly approached Liam, desperation in her eyes. I know I've made mistakes. But this child, I don't want it to be the result of a mistake. I want it to be a new beginning, even if I don't deserve it. Liam stepped back, avoiding her gaze. A new beginning, built on betrayal? Clara suddenly stood. Her voice was low but resonated through the room like a church bell. I lost my child in this house. And today, I lose my husband. But what hurts the most isn't the loss. It's realizing I once believed it was all a beautiful destiny. She turned to Nathan, her eyes cold and numb. Your love didn't die from the trauma. Just took a different path. Towards someone easier to forgive. Less wounded. Men like you always choose the path with less blood, don't you? Nathan tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Sophia wept. Liam looked away. No one dared to face the wreckage they had caused. Clara calmly pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. Everything's here, screenshots of messages, financial statements, travel records, divorce papers, and property transfer documents. Clara, are you? Nathan stammered. Am I what? Planning? No. I've decided. She looked up. I won't be a victim. A flash of lightning illuminated the window, casting stark shadows on their distressed faces. I used to think happiness meant having a family, Clara said, gazing at the sea. But today, I learned something more important. Living true to myself. Even if it means walking alone. Sophia sank into a chair. Liam turned to Clara, his eyes silent. Between them, no words, only quiet understanding. The baby? Liam asked. What will you do? Sophia cradled her belly softly. I'll have the child. But I won't force you to return. I just hope for a chance to start over, even if it's alone. No one offered comfort. No one consoled. But in that moment they all felt exposed, as if they'd just emerged from a storm, uncertain if they'd stepped into dawn or not. Clara left the living room. As the door closed behind her, she knew. Everything that needed to be said had been said. All the pain that needed to fall had fallen. What remained was emptiness. An emptiness where she could begin anew. That night, the beach house no longer felt like a haven for lovers, or the warm home of a picture-perfect family. It had become a stage. One final act where each person was forced to reread the script of their life. This time, with no cut scenes. Clara no longer cried. Her pain had settled like foam after a crashing wave. What remained was silence, and a piercing clarity that could chill the air. I have a few things to share, she said. Her voice as gentle as the evening breeze, yet strong enough to make everyone look up. From her handbag, Clara pulled out a thin folder and placed it on the table. Nathan and Sophia exchanged a glance, something in their eyes that resembled fear. In here are all the messages between the two of you, from the first flirty text to the so-called conference weekends. I've also included credit card statements, marked as business expenses. and a recorded call with Nathan's assistant, who confirmed he was never in Boston last weekend. She paused, her gaze scanning their faces, like a judge watching reactions in a courtroom. This isn't a threat. This is transparency. Liam, seated next to her, nodded slightly and added, I have a few interesting details as well. Sophia, do you remember Mercer's corporate ethics policy? Personal relationships with clients are strictly forbidden, especially when that client happens to be the lead attorney for one of your firm's 3 biggest accounts. Sophia stiffened. How do you know that? I'm an architect, Liam replied with a faint smile. But I also happen to sit on the professional ethics committee. And coincidentally, your regional director plays squash with me. Half truth, half strategy, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the way his words pierced through Sophia's defenses like a silent avalanche. Nathan stood up, his voice louder than usual. You're trying to destroy everything I've built over the past 15 years for a mistake? Clara remained seated, a calm smile brushing her lips. A mistake? I'm a lawyer, Nathan. I know the difference between a misstep and a calculated betrayal. The room thickened. Every sentence felt like a verdict. No courtroom, no judge, just truth laid bare. I'm not doing this for revenge, Clara said, her eyes drifting to the moonlit waves outside the window. I'm doing it to reclaim the narrative of my life. Nathan exhaled sharply. What do you want? A peaceful divorce, Clara answered plainly. I've already prepared the papers. You'll keep your job, if you keep quiet, but I'll retain full ownership of the properties and the savings we've accumulated over the last decade. Sophia turned to Liam. And what about you? Liam looked at her, for a long time. I don't know what's left between us, but I know I need time. I need honesty. And more than anything, I need myself. Silence fell again. No one cried. No one screamed. Each person lost in their own storm of reflection, as if they'd just walked out of the private courtroom of their own lives. Clara stood and adjusted her coat. None of us are perfect. But what I can't tolerate is the lie. She looked at Liam. Nothing more needed to be said. They understood each other in a language that transcended words, the language of those who had fallen, but refused to be buried. I don't need to win, Clara whispered at the door. I just need to be free. The door closed softly behind them, like the curtain falling at the end of a play. But the audience knew. The story wasn't over. It had only shifted scenes, from betrayal in the shadows, to the first bold steps toward freedom. 6 months passed like a slow-motion film. Yet every day was real, every moment heavy. Real like Clara moving out of the beach house once built with love, and where her dream of becoming a mother was laid to rest. Heavy like the cardboard boxes holding 13 years of memories. Each time she closed the lid, it was as if holding her breath through grief. Now, she lived alone in a small wooden house perched on a seaside cliff, far from the noise of her old world. The mornings no longer held the sound of a husband calling her name, but they did bring waves crashing below, and sunlight slipping gently through the curtains. It was enough to remind her that she was still alive, and more importantly, that she was worthy of another beginning. I got divorced, Clara said, her voice steady. During our final therapy session, told from the narrator's point of view. No dramatic courtroom battles like in the movies. We signed the papers quietly, divided everything according to the law. I kept most of the assets not because I won but because I was prepared. She paused, her gaze drifting toward the distance, as if she could see those days of gathering evidence, sending emails, recording phone calls. No tears then, just clarity. Nathan didn't lose his job, but he didn't get the promotion either. That incident made the firm's board delay his advancement. In the legal world, reputation is currency, and he'd spent his a little too carelessly. She chuckled, not out of bitterness, but with the quiet relief of someone who had finally stepped off the stage of a tragedy she no longer starred in. And Liam? We still see each other. Not as a couple. We agreed from the beginning. Wounds shouldn't be the foundation of love. But we're friends, Clara said, her eyes softening. He sends me photos of his daughter every month. A little girl born in chaos, yet somehow the new heartbeat of a once collapsing family. She looked down at her hand, gently twisting a thin silver ring she had bought for herself, a promise to no one else but her own soul. I've learned to go grocery shopping alone, to watch movies by myself, to have dinner with nothing but a book. And oddly, I've never felt more whole. I asked her one final question, as I always did at the end of our sessions. What do you think made you so strong? Clara was quiet for a long time. Then she smiled. I used to think strength meant never falling. Now I know, strength is standing back up after letting yourself fall long enough to finally hear your own voice. Outside the window, the waves still broke, the sea still shimmered, and sunlight continued to flood the small therapy room. Life hadn't changed, but Clara had. I used to be afraid of being alone, she said slowly. But now I know, choosing solitude is far kinder than sharing your life with someone who left you long ago but never moved out of your bed. That afternoon, sunlight spilled gently across Clara's shoulders as she leaned against the white wooden railing of her new seaside home. A place that no longer bore the shadow of her ex-husband or the silent cries of failed fertility treatments. The ocean breeze was still the same, only Clara had changed. It was the day she was invited to a farewell party for an old colleague from her law firm. The first time she returned to the social circle that had once been her entire world. She wore a simple navy blue dress, a touch of deep lipstick, and smiled, not to hide, but because she could finally smile for real. And then he appeared. Nathan. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, not because of the grayer hair, but because his eyes held a fatigue that couldn't be disguised. He approached her as the room cleared, leaving only Clara quietly reaching for her coat. You look really well, he said, hesitating. Because I am, she smiled, meeting his gaze without flinching. He stood in silence for a long while before finally gathering the courage to speak, like a man thawing after a long, bitter winter. Clara, I've wanted to say so many things, but I think the only one that matters now is, I'm sorry. She looked at him, not with anger, not with sadness. There was simply nothing left to break. You don't have to apologize, she said. Because apologies that come late can't soothe the nights I spent alone. And because I forgave you a long time ago, not for you but for myself. He nodded, blinking away the sting in his eyes. Then asked quietly, Are you seeing someone? She chuckled, tilting her head slightly.
No.
But I'm not alone either. I have the sea, a house full of sunlight, my books, and me. He smiled faintly, lowering his gaze. You deserve more than that. Clara looked toward the horizon, where the sun dipped into a blaze of red along the edge of the world. Nathan, you didn't betray me because I wasn't enough. You betrayed me because you were weak. And I don't blame that anymore. A cold breeze passed, not from the sea, but from the space between two people who were once one. He nodded again, then turned to leave, his figure growing smaller in the fading light. Clara stayed there. She didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes for a few moments. Her heart no longer tangled, no longer torn or wishing. Just a breeze, one last touch from the past brushing the shoulder of a woman who had weathered the storm and grown wiser through it. I, her therapist, sat across from Clara in our final session. So, what did you find at the end of this journey? She lifted her head, eyes clear, glimmering, and calm like still water. The truth. I nodded, waiting for her to go on. The truth hurts. But it also brings light. And only when there's nothing left to hide do we truly see ourselves. She smiled, and I saw myself in that light. Raw, scarred, but whole. Outside the window, the morning poured in, no other figure, no past lurking. Just Clara and a little room full of sunlight. Life can fall apart over a single message, but it can also be rebuilt with just one ray of light. And me? I chose to face the light. Speech balloon, if you've ever lived in the shadows, believe this. The light isn't far away. It begins the moment you stop lying to yourself. Pushpin Life whispers, where stories speak softly, yet awaken an entire life. Sunrise, subscribe to hear more of the quiet voices that echo through this noisy world.